Hi there, Dave Paulides, Canada Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our video series on missing people. Friends, it's been a rough month. 2020 was bad. 2021 is horrific to me. Nothing much has gone right in my world, but for me, getting back on the horse is better than sitting on the sidelines and living in my misery. And it is misery, and it's horrific. And I don't want anyone to think that it's an easy trek. But here we go. We're going to talk about 3 cases today, and you're going to see the similarities. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to make light of the last month. I'm not. And in fact, I'm going to read you some things that have come in. I've learned so much in the last 4 weeks about our world that I didn't know before. And what do you mean? Well, I've been introduced to some people at the right time in my life to make me pay attention to some things that are going on. Spiritually, for sure. And some of these people that I won't mention have been integral in my being able to cope with Ben being gone. The thousands of emails and notes I've received have just been out of this world wonderful, and I deeply appreciate it. And I have read everyone, and I try to send some nice response to each of you, and I hope that some of you have had those and read those. Now, story. This coat right here. You guys have never seen it probably. But about 6 or 7 years ago, Ben and I were on a trip together, and I brought a few coats, and he didn't dress warm enough, and he asked, hey, could I borrow a coat? So I gave him this one to wear, and he goes, wow, it's a really nice coat, Dad. It's got a lot of fur on the inside, and it's real cozy, and at the end of the trip, he goes, hey, can I have that coat? You know, Dad, what do I say? It was my favorite coat, but I gave it to him. For the last 6, 7 years, I've seen him in this coat hundreds of times. Full circle, came back. I'm telling you, I'm fighting this. And when I get into these moods where I start to weep, I've got to pull myself out of it. And I ask for help, and it usually happens. So, in my mind, I just did, and I'm pulling out of it right now. So, let's go to the mailbag. Some of you people hate the mailbag. Some of you love it. Well, I'm going to read you a few. It says, I'm 39 and not yet experienced the privilege of being a dad, but I cherish the time I've spent with my father, and also battled feelings of sadness and depression. When I read your post, I felt incredibly sorry for everything you must be going through, and I quickly felt guilty for feeling so happy yesterday, and I'd forgotten until that moment how very precious and short life can be. I know my dad never asked us to tell him, I love you, Dad, but my brother and I knew he needed to hear it. And often asked us to tell him, I love you, Dad. But my brother and I knew he needed to hear it. Often he's sensitive and emotional, loving, sweet man. I see that exact trait in you. I hope Ben was able to tell you how much you meant to him every day, and I know he must have loved you very much. I'm terribly sorry you'll have only memories of saying, I love you, Dad, to cherish until you meet again one day. I love everything you do for us, Mr. P, and I can't imagine how much pain you're going through right now and from now on. Please don't forget that there are other dads, sons out there like me who appreciate you very much. And the work you do, often sad at times, helps me forget about my issues I struggle with, my depression, and hearing you discuss your missing 411 stories and looking forward to your videos. Gives me something to look forward to, because sometimes when people are dealing with depression and mental health issues, we feel like there's nothing else to look forward to or live for. And I'm grateful I feel positive enough lately to forget about the emotions I've had when I didn't care if I woke up much anymore. What I'm saying is you give me, people like me, something positive worth looking forward to, and that's special. It reminds me of Mr. Rogers, sort of. The way you're consistent and informative, always sharing an important life lesson. So thanks for that. I really am grateful for everything you do, and I'm deeply saddened by your loss. Please remember your son loved you, and your fans love you. And I have no way to express this to you other than telling you in my own words. Like when I tell my dad I love him when I know he needed to hear it. I thought you needed to hear this too. Wow. The reminders from people that these stories give them something to clutch onto. It means something to me. And I've heard this hundreds of times in letters and things that you have sent. I never would have thought it meant that much to you. So I appreciate it. I thank you. This is a biggie. It's from a priest. Watch your episode on your personal experience of your loss. As a Roman Catholic priest, I personally know what the outcome is on a suicide, and that can take a whole toll on a human soul. It can affect all that are concerned to a family. My devotional prayers are with you all. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. This statement is part of the Gospels of Christ. Suicide is sometimes a sickness that is silent to others who may not see it coming. As for you, David, you may not get an answer that you may want to hear. Nevertheless, it is rising due to these challenging times. As a priest, I am there for those who mourn and seek comfort through Christ. Our faiths can sometimes heal the wounds of a caring soul. Suicide can also be a paranormal related situation. I can personally say that I have saved countless souls who are affected by an entity, but an unknown spiritual entity. It is more common than you think. This type of situation of a spiritual kind can enter a soul at any given time or place. A demonic can take advantage of a soul who is suffering from mental stress or sickness. It is known throughout the teachings of my faith as my pastoral obligation as a priest. I know too well as oppression, obsession, or possession can take place for a dark reason. David, I can only give you insight to what has been revealed in these dark times. Have you noticed the stress that this country has gone through on this rhetoric and demonization of our political fallout? And also to say that this COVID has put this country on a financial strain at every level in our lives, not only to mention our extreme weather fallout that has affected our emotions. These are signs that has brought suicide out on the youngest souls who are innocent. Not enough is being done to help the innocent on this mental stress depression. Until this country and its problems can come together in peace, we will see more stress on the young. They are the future. May we all find peace through Christ. Yours in Christ. I never even knew that a Catholic priest would watch my channel. Excuse me. But not only Catholic priests, but all denominations have written to me. Everyone you can imagine, all different faiths. And I want you to know that I'm not going to demean anyone. It's not my style. And whatever your faith, I'll listen. And it's not that I believe or I don't believe, but I think during these times we need compassionate souls. Another letter. About a year before my parents were married, they were at a bonfire on a beach next to a national park and forest somewhere in California. Well, my dad stood straight up and started walking towards and finally into the water in a trance. My mother went after him once he started walking into the water. She said she was yelling in his face, thus finally, with the water up to their waists, snapped out of it, and my mother walked him out of the water. First of all, let me tell you, the water in Northern California is cold. It averages between 48 and 54 degrees. You can get hypothermia very quickly. Later on, he described his account to my mother, telling her that he heard what sounded like many women singing a song in his head and in a language that he couldn't write down or really describe. But at the time, even though he couldn't understand the language, he was basically being told that he was to come with them to what was laid out to him as a paradise with the most beautiful women he had ever seen. My father, being a sailor, said it was the song of the siren. But he also said if my mother hadn't been there, he would be dead. You may think this story, you may use the story if it corresponds with any of your other stories. Many thanks for your consideration. So my question to the audience, he heard it, but nobody else heard it. So do we all have antennas in our head that we can hear different frequencies? Or was he targeted by something to do something to himself? And if he was targeted, why was he targeted? And if he was targeted, then whoever the suspect was obviously knew he was around a lot of people. So it was meant to make a point that maybe they could control people at their whim. I don't know. I've always thought that people who hear things, they don't necessarily have to have mental illness. I think that there are too many stories of people hearing things where it was real and they really did hear something that was unusual. So just because you hear something, don't believe it that you have mental illness. This was a prayer that was sent to me. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console to be understood, as to understand. To be loved, as to love. For it's in giving that we receive, and it's in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it's in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. That was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful prayer. New letter. Dear Dave, I'm just learning the loss of your precious Ben. I cannot imagine the depths of your pain. I consider you part of my brotherhood, and this is the reason I'm reaching out to you, offering support. One of the things in my experience with suicide is that, like many crises we face, initially there are many people there, and in a time we can find ourselves still struggling, but with few people seemingly to turn to. I'm now retired from a combined 38 years in military and law enforcement career. I'm a former crisis negotiator with more than 20 years experience dealing with suicide. I currently run our peer support program at operationsfirstresponse.org, a group dedicated to veterans. I've attached my bio. I wrote to you before because of our shared interest in the missing. This time it's personal. I too have my share of both personal and professional losses and near losses to suicide. I attribute my successes in helping others struggling with suicide and depression by helping them see the spiritual component of their struggles. This is not something I learned on the job, but something gifted to me by my faith and experience. You are correct. There is a spiritual war going on. Let me stop there. I know that sounds extreme. Oh, spiritual war. But you know, I posted a link to Australian suicides of young men in my last video. If you haven't seen it, go back, look at the pinned post and you'll find it. But when you start to hear from around the world the number of young people that are committing suicide, this is not normal. If this is related to COVID, then in my humble opinion, the cure is worse than the disease, because we are losing our next generation of brilliant people. The letter goes on. And as you told your audience, we are not alone. No, I am here for you to talk. No, I am praying for Ben's eternal rest and for your entire family at this painful time. And yes, it is my sincerest belief that at this moment, he is in the presence of the Almighty. In closing, I would like to offer you a favorite prayer. I hope it brings you some comfort. Pray for peace of mind and heart. Eternal, holy God, I come to you burdened with my worries, fears, doubts, and troubles. I do. Calm and quiet me with peace of mind. Empty me of the anxiety that disturbs me, of the concerns that weary my spirit, and the weight heavy on my heart. Loosen my grip on the disappointments and grievances I hold on to so tightly. Release me from the pain of the past hurts, of the present anger and tension, of future fears. Sometimes it's too much for me, Lord. Too many demands and problems. Too much sadness, suffering, and stress. Renew me spiritually and emotionally. Give me new strength, hope, and confidence. Prepare me to meet the constant struggles of daily life with a deeper faith and trust in you. Let your love set me free for peace, for joy, for grace, for life, and for others forever. May God, you and your family, peace. Sincerely, Phil. I can't tell you how many of those type of letters I've had. I could sit here and read them for weeks. That's how many. And you know, we hear constantly how social media is bad and how it destroys people, and I know it does. But if Ben's death has brought one thing to the top, it's that there are so many great people out there that care about you. And many of you have said, well, Dave, I appreciate what you're doing for me. Well, let's turn the tides. I appreciate what you've done for me. And the letters, the caring, telling me that what our team has done for you and trying to educate the world and save lives, I'm eternally grateful. And I suppose that's one reason why I'm here. Those letters kind of renewed my faith in humanity. So, 3 stories for you this week. And I was working through these thinking, the first case I actually talked to about Ben a few weeks before he passed on. A man named Brian Guberman, 27 years old, born March 21st, 1947. Brian, a super talented guy. Missing July 1974, Vancouver, Canada. He was born in Winnipeg, grew up on the north side of the town. He eventually graduated from Garden City College and then the University of Winnipeg at Manitoba and got a BA and a teaching credential. And after graduation, he traveled to Europe, like a lot of young people do. Came back and he taught at Hugh John Macdonald High School. And while he was working, he had an interest in being an actor. And he had a great skill at playing a guitar. And he did that for many years. Appeared in several productions at the Rainbow Stage Theatre during the 70s. In 1973, he moved to Edmonton, Alberta. And in 1974, he renewed his passport. Well, late in the summer of 74, and when he was living in Edmonton, he liked to go hiking. And one of these days, he went to Sylvan Lake, Sylva, kind of southwest of Edmonton. In 74, it was pretty rural. Nowadays, it's not so rural, but it was rural. Pretty much forest all the way around. He came back shaken. And he told his sister that he saw something in the woods that wasn't human. And he said he thought it was the devil. He said it was wearing something that looked like a nun would wear. It had no arms, it glowed, and it hummed. He didn't say it had any hair, but he was very, very shaken. About 5 feet tall, he described it as. Well, during April, May, so right after that summer, he disappeared. He wrote a letter to his parents near the end of the summer saying that he was going to do some traveling. And he took off. Well, the parents didn't hear from him, and they hired a private investigator. And the private investigator determined that in April to May of 75, he was at the Krishna Temple in Vancouver, Canada. Why is that important? So this is a picture of the Krishna group, date unknown, but probably in the 70s, maybe the late 60s. But Brian sought out the Krishnas after having this sighting, almost trying to find answers. And the private investigator that was looking for him went and interviewed the people at the temple in Vancouver, and they said that no, he took off in his vehicle sometime after May of 75, and they didn't see him again. Well, the private investigator did more searching with the State Department in Canada and found that in 1977, there was a notation by the India, like Delhi, India, I don't know where in India, but the police in India had dealt with him in some way, and that's all the telegram said. Now, I showed this to Ben, and I sent it to him because the Krishna community is pretty small in general, and they know each other very well. And I would hope that I know there's a lot of Krishna people that follow me, and I hope that if you've ever heard of Brian Guberman, that's his North American name, he obviously went to India to study Krishna and be closer to Dwarka maybe. But that was the last known picture of him. He'd be about 75 years old now, thereabouts. Born in 47, so 50, about 73 years old. If anybody knows Brian, contact Canadian Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and let them know. But I can tell you that Ben's trip to India, he called me about every other day. We got him on a special plan. And he said, Dad, this is great. I'm experiencing super nice things. The people here are giving. He met some gurus there. And he said it was a powerful thing. I was just ecstatic. He had a good time. But I thought it was odd because I found this case of this individual that went missing that was associated with the Krishna movement. Now, do I think the Krishna movement had anything with him disappearing? No. If anything, it probably saved him from the hell his mind was going through for what he saw. So, Brian Guberman. Probably never have heard of him. Next case, Kurt Sola, missing October 23rd, 1981, Newburgh Heights, Ohio, just south of Cleveland. This is Newburgh Heights right here. This is Kurt, and that is Lake Erie. Anybody who follows me knows there's something about the Great Lakes that are very uncomfortable. But Kurt grew up in the inner city area, played baseball, loved football, liked fishing. This case really hit me hard when I started to look into it. He goes to a party with a friend, and on October 23rd, and he gets drunk at the party. He was 17 at the time. And anyhow, his friend goes to get a coat, tells Kurt to stay where he was outside the party, comes back, Kurt's gone. And Kurt doesn't show up at home that night. And that was a Friday night. Saturday, he doesn't show up, and his brothers, family, and friends all start looking for him. Sunday, He's reported as missing. October 25th, a missing person report is filed. On Wednesday, October 20, and by the way, there's a massive search for 2 or 3 days. They don't find him. On October 28th, some kids are playing in a ravine about a quarter mile away, and they find a body face up in a pond. It's Kurt. He's deceased. And they find that he is not wearing a shoe, and they do an autopsy. He'd been missing for 5 days, and the coroner determined he'd been deceased for 24 to 36 hours, a day to a day and a half. And his blood alcohol level was 0.11. Now, let's just say for a man 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, every beer you drink is equal to 0.02 percentage into your system of alcohol. Now, drunk driving in the US is 0.08, but every hour your body burns 0.02 percentage per hour. So for a 17-year-old to be 0.11, it's pretty drunk. But you got to remember something, that if Kurt had only been dead 1 day, that means he was alive on Tuesday. And now you start thinking, yeah, but that's 4 days after the party. There's no way alcohol that he drank Friday night would still be in his system if he was alive then. This doesn't seem possible. Now, the area he was found in had been searched upside down and backwards many times. The police chief couldn't figure it out, and it was one of the biggest cases of their career. So, proximity to Lake Erie, one shoe on. It matches cases where other deaths from Wisconsin, New York, the United Kingdom, where young people are found drinking in water face up. Now, the kicker to all this, the coroner couldn't determine a cause of death. Folks, these are cookie cutter cases. And when you look at it from a local level, people tend to think, oh yeah, he was murdered by somebody. But when you look at it from a worldwide issue, these cases are in Australia, UK, Spain, US, Canada, and they keep happening. They keep happening. And until the police start looking at it from that worldwide perspective, they're going to keep thinking it's a local, regional issue. No. And as I've stated many times, coroners in these jurisdictions know something odd is going on. They just can't figure out what. And it bugs the heck out of them that they cannot figure out how a body can die without a physical reason. Now, I know many of you have said, well, they stole a soul. There's been some physicians that have talked about the need to understand the soul and its component to life. But as of right now, nobody's really looking into it. That's too bad. So, Kurt Sova, very, very fascinating case, one that fits it, our earmark to the T. And I think if his family or law enforcement in that greater Cleveland area understood how many times this has happened, the perspective, the paradigm of this incident would change. Ben Roseland, 19 years old. Age progression of what he looks like today, what he looked at the day he disappeared on February 9th, 2008, Clinton, Iowa. Ben was a good kid. And I don't know if you can see this, but I'll pick it up for you. Very religious, wore a cross around his neck. It's in the picture. So, I want you to pay attention with the Sola case and this case. It's the reason I put them back to back. Ben Roseland, he was 19 years old when he vanished off the face of the earth. There's a local map of Clinton, Iowa. And I want you to look at it on Google Earth so you can kind of get a perspective on it. But the Mississippi River, something I've talked about a lot. Mississippi is associated with a lot of these disappearances, specifically around that St. Paul, Minneapolis area. So Ben was at a friend's house right here on this red dot. And it was 410th Street South. That was the general address. And it's 1,000 feet essentially to the Mississippi River from that location. And he was going to the store right here, just a block away, 2 blocks away, the blue dot. And the previous winter, Ben was in a car accident where he fractured his skull. And that's important because many of the people that I talk about have some type of injury or illness in conjunction with the disappearance, meaning that he's still kind of recovering. So as he goes from here to here, he disappears. Doesn't make any sense. Well, they start doing a search. Now, if you can notice, he's kind of walking northeast to the store. But southeast, about 8 blocks during the search, they find a shoe. Doesn't make any sense. And they found it just in a field. They search some more, and about 100 yards from that shoe, they find his other shoe on top of a snowbank. Well, this is the opposite direction that he's traveling. And it's February. It's pretty cold in Iowa. So how did it get there? Well, during that search, the Clinton Fire Department tried to put their boat in the water, but the wind picked up and the waves were so bad they couldn't put it in. So let's think about this. The weather changed. They couldn't put the boat in the water. Missing shoes. Water related. Look how close the river is to where this guy disappeared. They brought in canines, and the canines couldn't pick up Ben's scent anywhere. He had a previous injury or illness. Now, his sister was interviewed for a story sometime after Ben disappeared. And the sister said that Ben's cat still slept on his bed every day and every night, waiting for him to come home. Rough. Now, an Aeromed helicopter searched for Ben for several days. An Eco-SAR canine team searched for him for several days. Clinton Fire and Police and Search and Rescue searched for him. Where'd Ben go? My humble, educated guess was the Mississippi River. Now, Ben didn't go there voluntarily, come on. But what took him? How was he taken? Well, obviously they stripped him of something, his shoes. They probably stripped him of other things that they didn't find. But if you think about the other cases that I've talked about involving this identical situation, come on, folks. This should be humbly recorded into your mind that something very weird is going on. So, Ben Roseland, 19. Kurt Sova, 17. These people are young, healthy, gone. Unknown cause of death. Doesn't make any sense. Now, since my Ben passed on, many of you have opened up and talked about entities and spiritual warfare. Even the priest did. And the priest talks about exorcism and people being possessed and not knowing that they're being possessed, even just at a lower magnitude, hearing things in your head. And the one thing that I've heard from people is you have to keep your defenses up, meaning you got to stay in that positive space. You got to ask for defenses to protect you. And you can't let yourself be negative or depressed, because that's when people are vulnerable, apparently. So I think this is a fascinating path just because the relationship to some of these people and some of the stories I've read to you. I mean, somebody walking into the water in front of his wife, hearing voices. Something's talking to him. He had no mental illness. So, this has been good for me because it gets my mind back on track and trying to understand these cases. And again, thank you so much for your emails and statements. If you're going to email me, again, please try to keep it to like 2 paragraphs or less. It's really hard for me to work my way through all of them. I'm going to try to stay here with you and not take any more time off. I think it's important that you and I converse and that we keep these stories front and center. Please hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you are subscribed. That's another thing. My gosh, so many of you are getting unsubscribed from this channel. It's ridiculous. Yeah, who knows what's going on. But I appreciate the friendship. I appreciate your following. And if everything works out, I'll be with you next week. Take care.